Ever found yourself endlessly scrolling through social media even though you know there's work to be done? It's a common predicament, isn't it? The allure of the screen, the mindless entertainment, the instant gratification, they all beat the monotonous drone of responsibility. But why? Why is it easier to squander hours on video games or phone browsing, but the thought of studying for 30 minutes seems daunting? Even though you logically comprehend that studying or working on that side business will yield long-term benefits, the immediate pleasure of digital distraction seems more appealing. Let's delve into the science behind it. It's not just about one activity being easier than the other, it's about what's happening in our brains. The answer lies in a neurotransmitter called dopamine. Often labeled as the pleasure molecule, dopamine is more accurately the molecule of desire. It's the push behind our motivations, the reason we get up and do things. Consider this. Neuroscientists conducted experiments on rats by implanting electrodes in their brains. When the rat pulled a lever, the scientists stimulated the rat's reward system, releasing dopamine. The result? The rats developed an insatiable craving, pulling the lever relentlessly, even forsaking food and sleep. On the flip side, when dopamine release was blocked, the rats were disinterested in everything, even basic survival needs like food and water. This isn't just a rat phenomenon. Your brain also prioritizes based on anticipated dopamine release. If an activity releases a lot of dopamine, you'll want to repeat it, while activities releasing little dopamine don't hold the same appeal. So, whether it's comfort food or a good Netflix binge, these high dopamine activities, even if they're detrimental, keep us coming back for more. It's not the activity itself, but the anticipated reward that triggers dopamine. So if dopamine is the driving force behind our desires, how can we use that knowledge to our advantage? This, my friends, is the dopamine dilemma. Stay tuned as we unravel the mystery in our next scenes. Dopamine, often called the pleasure molecule, is a bit more complex than that. It's not so much about pure pleasure, but about motivation and desire. It's the neurotransmitter that urges us to seek, to explore, to strive for more. It's the fuel that powers our drive to accomplish tasks, big or small. Picture dopamine as the brain's cheerleader, giving us the pep rally we need to get up and do things. It's our internal reward system, making us feel good when we achieve our goals. But it also works in anticipation, sparking our desire to reach for those rewards in the first place. Now, you might be wondering just how influential is this dopamine? To illustrate, let's take a dive into the world of neuroscience and a series of experiments conducted on rats. Scientists implanted electrodes into the brains of these rats, specifically in the areas associated with reward. Each time a rat pulled a lever, it received a jolt of dopamine, sparking an intense craving. The rats became so obsessed with this dopamine rush that they would forgo food, sleep, everything, just to keep pulling that lever until they dropped from exhaustion. Then, the scientists flipped the switch. They blocked the release of dopamine in the rats' brains. Suddenly, the once energetic rodents became lethargic. They lost their drive to eat, to drink, even to mate. They just didn't crave anything anymore. They still enjoyed food when it was placed directly into their mouths, but they lacked the motivation to seek it out themselves. This is the power of dopamine. It's not hunger or thirst that drives us to seek sustenance, but the anticipation of the reward, the hit of dopamine that comes with achieving our goal. While the rat experiments are extreme cases, they shed light on how dopamine influences our own behaviors and motivations. So, dopamine is more than a simple pleasure molecule. It's a complex and powerful force that shapes our desires and drives our actions. But how does this apply to us? To our daily lives, to our struggles with motivation and the pursuit of difficult tasks? As you can see, dopamine is a powerful motivator, but how does this apply to us? You might not be a lab rat, but dopamine is still pulling your strings. Dopamine, this tiny neurotransmitter, is a master puppeteer of sorts, controlling many of our daily actions and decisions. It's like a backstage conductor, orchestrating our life's performance, dictating which notes are played and when. Imagine your day-to-day life as a series of choices, each leading to a different path. Some paths are easy, others tough. Some are short, others long. But the one thing they all have in common? They're all influenced by dopamine. Let's consider the choices we make around food. You're presented with two options, a healthy salad or a juicy burger. Logically, you know the salad is the better choice for your health. But the burger, it promises instant gratification, a burst of flavor, a dopamine hit, and more often than not, that's the path we choose. Similarly, consider the battle between exercise and lounging on the couch. The former is demanding, the latter easy and comfortable. Yet the prospect of feeling good after a workout, of achieving your fitness goals, releases dopamine. And this dopamine rush can make the hard choice of exercising over lounging a little bit easier. But there's a catch. Dopamine is also the fuel behind addictive behaviors. It's the reason why scrolling endlessly through social media or binging on TV shows can feel so satisfying. These activities offer immediate rewards, the joy of a funny meme, the thrill of a plot twist. And each time we indulge in these activities, our brain releases dopamine, reinforcing the behavior and creating a cycle that can be hard to break. On the surface, it might seem like dopamine is the villain of our story. After all, it's the force behind our unhealthy food choices and screen addictions. But remember, dopamine is also what motivates us to achieve our goals, to strive for success, to push beyond our comfort zones. Now that we understand how dopamine influences our behavior, what can we do about it? Dopamine isn't inherently bad. It's all about how we manage it. The intricate dance of dopamine in our brains is a double-edged sword. On one hand, it's the driving force behind our motivation, pushing us to achieve our goals, whether that's finishing a marathon or acing an exam. It rewards us with pleasure when we accomplish these tasks, creating a positive feedback loop that encourages us to keep striving. On the other hand, an uncontrolled release of dopamine can lead to addictive behaviors. This is because dopamine doesn't discriminate between healthy and unhealthy activities. It only understands the anticipation of pleasure. For instance, the same dopamine rush that motivates us to work out can also lead us to binge-watch television shows or overindulge in junk food. This is where the concept of a dopamine detox comes in. The premise is simple. By reducing our exposure to high dopamine activities, we can reset our brain's reward system. This doesn't mean eliminating all sources of pleasure, but rather mindfully choosing activities that provide a balanced dopamine release. The idea is to break the cycle of dopamine-driven activities that have short-term appeal but long-term consequences. Instead, we should engage in activities that might be challenging or less instantly gratifying but ultimately more fulfilling. This might mean swapping mindless scrolling on social media for reading a book, or replacing a sugar-laden dessert with a piece of fruit. But remember, the goal of a dopamine detox isn't to become a monk or an ascetic. It's about regaining control over our motivations and actions, recalibrating our reward system to better align with our long-term goals and aspirations. Yes, this may be challenging at first. Changing habits is never easy. But remember, just as our brains learn to crave high dopamine activities, they can also learn to find pleasure in more beneficial ones. It's all about resetting and retraining our brain to enjoy the hard things in life. So, the key isn't to eliminate dopamine, but to manage it properly. Let's discuss how. Ready to trick your brain into liking hard things? It's time for a dopamine detox. Now, what is a dopamine detox? It's a process of consciously reducing high dopamine activities in your life. This means cutting down on the easy, instantly gratifying pleasures like binge-watching TV, endlessly scrolling through social media, or devouring junk food. These activities flood your brain with dopamine, making it harder to find motivation for tasks that offer a slower, less intense dopamine release. Now, don't worry, this doesn't mean you have to live a life devoid of pleasure. It's all about balance and nuance. The goal is to recalibrate your dopamine reward system to make it easier for you to find satisfaction in the more challenging, productive activities. This could be reading a book, studying for an exam, or working on a personal project. So how do you start a dopamine detox? First, identify the high dopamine activities in your life. Then, gradually decrease the time you spend on these activities. Replace them with lower dopamine tasks that align with your long-term goals. It's crucial to start small and be consistent. Try substituting just 15 minutes of social media time with 15 minutes of reading. As your brain adjusts, gradually increase this time. The benefits of a dopamine detox are profound. You'll find it easier to concentrate on tasks. You'll be more productive and you'll feel a greater sense of satisfaction from your achievements. But remember, it's not always going to be easy. There will be challenges and moments of temptation. It's important to be patient with yourself and keep your long-term goals in sight. In conclusion, dopamine is not the enemy. It's a powerful tool that, when understood and managed, can help us lead more productive and satisfying lives. With a better understanding of dopamine and a plan to manage it, you're ready to tackle those hard tasks with a newfound motivation.